So I've just watched Django Unchained 1.5 times. It was that good. And I wanted to talk quickly about two scenes which were really interesting. I almost want to say the two best scenes, but it's really hard to pick from any Quentin Tarantino film um, which would be the two best scenes because each scene is so individually tailored, has such a rich story to tell behind it. All of his scenes do, including even sort of the sort of interlude scenes. The little stories. Like I think, for example, in this movie, when they're introducing the character, Kerry Washington's character, and then she says, they have all this description about her, and then we finally see her, and she just says, "They call me Hildy." I mean, just as simple as that, and you just see so much in that scene. But there are two scenes in particular that I think were really good. Where everyone will notice the first scene, which of course is really interesting because he frees this um, he frees this nigger. And I'll talk about the use of the word nigger a little bit later. You notice even I stumble with saying it because I'm like nigger or whatever. And being from the South also, I've heard it. I've heard it. But the two best scenes I would say are when the scene where Django first shows himself as a hero. And so you see that this is kind of the Western, the spaghetti Western, there is a superhero of the movie, and it's Django. I mean, it's not like it takes a genius to figure it out, even though in some ways, cinematographically, he's portrayed as the supporting character in classic Hollywood style. But then in classic Tarantino style, there are these two characters, and you get to see one in the front, but then the real interesting part of the movie is that you learn all this backstory about the actual hero. And so when the scene where we first see Django as a hero comes towards the very beginning, it's the first time when he suits up, and he gets to choose his own outfit. And of course that slave makes that joke like, "You're free. Do they make you dress like that?" Showing almost that character, in a sense, is just it's just sharpening his teeth. So he chooses, unsurprisingly, Confederate blue as his costume. So he's a peacock riding on this horse in this Confederate blue, and he makes his first kill. And I mean, his first kill is just spectacular. He literally intervenes when a slave woman is just about to be beaten. And by this time, we know that he's actually witnessed his wife be beaten by these guys. So also a considerable coincidence of between the characters, again in classic Tarantino style. So he's been freed by this guy who's a bounty hunter, and it turns out that his first hunt. His second hunt, technically, in the movie, they went to get the sheriff first, but their second hunt, once he suits up and everything, is the guy who actually beat his wife. And he had to watch that. And of course, even that comes back later in the story in very interesting ways, with Samuel Jackson, and you try to figure out, well, how did his wife's owner know to expose her whips on her back to sort of reveal whether or not she and Django were in fact related in some way, knew each other, and that was the whole ruse behind that segment of the film. And so, of course, like I said, in classic Tarantino style, he keeps weaving back and forward with these stories. But in that scene where he's the first hero, we see here his theme music, Django, and all this kind of stuff. He appears, we see the full-length view, and he's standing there, just mighty for the first time, again, on a plantation looking at all these slaves. It's almost like he's come to liberate them, but, he does so symbolically by killing the slave whippers. And that's something else that's interesting about this movie. Is more than just slave owners. You got to see that also that class of white people who were owned by the 1% and meant to do their bidding. And and my battery's low. And so in that scene, we see him shoot the one brother who has Bible verses, strapped to him, and you just see how crazy and ironic it is that to control people through the Bible. But in the next part, we see, I guess you could call the reason why this movie had to be made by a white person and someone like Quentin Tarantino, because he literally takes one brother's slave whip and whips the other brother to death. I mean, whips the shit this guy. And I have a bootleg copy that I watched streaming online that I happened upon. I have not downloaded it. And we don't get to see him, well, you get to hear the people enjoying that whipping. To some extent. And so he beats the mess out of this slave whipper Punisher who would partake in whipping his wife, and who was, doing this same thing to another person at the very moment. And so he whips the mess out of him, and that for a lot of people is that turning moment, that fear that, that black people would just do to them what's been done to us. And I'm glad that, Quentin Tarantino got that out early, and that he made sure that people knew that it was attached to those characters. It wasn't just about hating white people and getting white. It was evilness, and it happened to be inhabited in the minds and hearts of those white people. So it's not just like, we're just going to get white people. But with that said, he got them, and I love everything about the scene. He said, "Y'all want to see something?" Or even his strong voice when he first approaches, and like I said, that they pan up and they show him in his Superman uniform in that Confederate blue, and he calls out his name. You hear this resonant voice, almost for the first time, as if you see the slaves versus this hero that's just beneath that layer of servitude. So that's one scene that I thought was spectacular. Let me check the battery. And the second spectacular scene, of course, and this is just the first half of the movie, is the prelude to the KKK scene. So Django has gone on to make his, I think it's the now third kill. And the guy from Miami Vice, again, Tarantino in his star, appearances, star ensemble, plays the slaveholder. And in the first scene, where he's introduced, Don Johnson, I think it is, and they use nigga, this, nigga, that, and it's not done flippantly. Where would the story be if they hadn't used nigga that much? Same with Pulp Fiction, but also same with Mark Twain. You can't take the nigga out of it. You can take the nigga out of the story, but you can't take the story out of the nigga. That's not what I meant to say, but what I mean to say is that the use of the word nigga is very integral to this story, because I think it is that meta level of violence. We see the whipping, we see, Kerry Washington, well, we see what happens to her. We see all kinds of atrocities, but we also, more of the actual violence that we see on screen is violence towards white people. That's also interesting. A lot of people may not have noticed. But but the use of the word nigger is also, we see how because it was used just so, it was so everyday. It was just even we see Jamie Foxx, in the scenes like, when they first ride into that town and for their first kill, what's everybody looking at? And he's like, they ain't never seen no nigga on no horse. I mean, again, it's like that him saying that, and the way that Don Johnson says it, nigga, get off there, nigga, oh, that nigga, no, that other nigga, just so flippantly. It also reins in of how deeply embedded niggitude is in the minds and hearts of American people. So we needed that. But with that said, the second best scene so far, I might change as I watch the movie over and over in years to come, is the prelude to the Klan, where they can't get together. It's extended. It's just this buffoonery comic scene where they're wearing these white hoods and they can't see out of them because they're novices and they're just getting it together. Of course, I'll remind you that in 1858 there wasn't that lynching, the lynch mobs, for example, because slaves were actual commodities. So you couldn't just kill a slave just like that. You'd rather sell them for cheap, as Django was, sell them down the river for cheap, than just lynch them. Who would just lynch a slave? I mean, you buy it and then just, no. Even if they run away, you got to do something, to assert your authority. And just lynching is not it. Lynching has a very different meaning, comes from a very different time, just afterwards, when we were free. And I think we're going to see a lot more lynching, for example, now in the age of, and today, we'll see more of that figurative lynching. But back then, you know, before, in 1858, again, before the beginning of the Civil War, with the fugitive slave law, we actually see, you know, these guys who are just like, again, just haphazardly, we're not going to wear this, you know, it's like a lodge meeting, we're not going to wear this, this hood is silly, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And they're literally, you know, the guys are fighting over this, how stupid and absurd this hood is. And again, it's one of those scenes where you see the absurdity of all of it. And I think that that is what Quentin Tarantino is very good at. He's also good at preluding. You know, he said that as Django goes into their, you know, when he first gets his uniform, he says, you know, you're playing a character and you can never break character. But of course we know that at the clinching moment of the movie, it's the guy, the bounty hunter, who breaks character, and then, you know, that just is downfall to some other mess. But it's these interesting kind of things that make the movie so good, and you have to see it. Yes, it is like Inglorious Slaveholding Bastards, you know, pulp nigga fiction. I mean, so many other names that you could call, but it's him, you know, it's Jackie at, you know, it's Jackie, you know, it's Jackie Freeman, not Jackie Brown, but Jackie Freeman. You know, it's all of that wrapped into a movie. It's one of his, I can't even say it's one of his best works, because each of his movies are so incredibly good. And the scenes, you know, you saw remnants of Kill Bill, you know, with the slang, when that guy, in this very scene that I'm talking about, where he first appears as a superhero, and they shoot the third brother off of the horse, and you see the blood splatter, you know, across the delicate cotton. And what's interesting about that, again, true Quentin Tarantino style, he is, you know, it's just like this blood over this cotton with this pure white cotton. I mean, I don't have to unpack that for you, but it's a really interesting metaphor for the Lehman Brothers, for them to unpack and for us to unpack in hindsight. So enjoy the movie. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Also, I've been getting a lot of like fag comments on my videos. Find something else to do.